What if hip-hop never existed? Question. Do you think there'd be as many heads screaming out, stop snitching? What if Adam and Eve ain't eat the fruit? You think we'd be able to see the truth? Or what if Albert Einstein ain't think of the nuke? Ain't teach us to shoot. You think there'd be as many plays out there if there was no boost? Matter of fact, what if white man hung off a noose? Would it still be cool to say nigga? Or maybe we would make six figures? Or would we wanna be crackers? Would be rappers. What if Martin Luther King survived? You think the New Orleans flood would have caused him to drop and die? I wonder what if and see what is. Stand back from the picture and ask yourself why. What if life wasn't all you thought? What if everything was gone? What if we switched to rights and wrongs? You think you'd change a route to the road we on? What if life wasn't all you thought? What if everything you knew was gone? What if we switched to rights and wrongs? You think you'd change a route to the road? Christopher Wallace never got murked. How much money would Sean Carter be worth? What if Tupac never got hit with the flame? Would the game still have changed, filled with these lames? What if Jabari wasn't speeding down the street? What if the bullet Malcolm sent never hit Zeke? At the house instead of the stop, or Ali never got bopped by the cops. What if the little homie Easy didn't die? Stand back from the picture and ask yourself why. What if life wasn't all you thought? What if everything you knew was gone? What if rights and wrongs? You think you'd change a route to the road we on? What if life wasn't all you thought? What if everything you knew was gone? What if we switched to rights and wrongs? You think you'd change a route to the road we on?
Welcome to the fourth branch program, The Place for Common Sense. Thank you for being here. I am Amidst. Today we have a very special program, which is a full program. We will be taking a quick look at the state of race relations in America. Of course, of this topic of this program is war on blacks. Since we began this particular topic here on the fourth branch, the question that we never stop getting is, which war on blacks? If you've been watching this program, if you've been following it, or if you take a look at the video that we have on the People Branch YouTube channel, you would notice that we started the conversation going as far back as the beginning of slavery in order to put some context in the conversation. And of course, slavery ended really quite a while ago. Now we are in the midst of the 21st century. Should we be talking about war on blacks? This is the topic. It is not out of the blue that racism, discrimination, prejudice are still rampant in America. It's a state which was established even before slavery. But how in the world can that state, that environment survive so beyond slavery? Of course, it is in our effort to understand that we went as far back as slavery, in fact before slavery, to understand how this mindset, this process, this interaction between different races, how that has evolved. But discrimination is not just against blacks. We know that in countries where there is not any sizable group of blacks, or the country may not even have blacks, there is always discrimination between various groups. But through throughout history, something happened. For instance, here in the United States, the country has gone through various period of discrimination against various groups. The Jews were discriminated against. The Irish were discriminated against. The Italian were discriminated against. But one thing is common among all those groups that were discriminated against is the fact that there may still be some form of prejudice and discrimination against those groups, but for the most part, those groups have pretty much been out of the limelight and have been enjoying the privilege of living in America like any other white group. But blacks have been under a permanent state of racism, discrimination, and we ought to understand why. Because there is no solution without an understanding of the problem, or at the very least, the roots of the problem. But what makes the pursuit of an understanding even more critical is the fact that blacks in America are not just discriminated against, but they have been murdered, executed sometime publicly, caught on camera, on tape, by the very individuals whose job is to protect them. So that makes the understanding all the more important, the pursuit of a solution all the more critical. In a civilized society, it would have never been acceptable for a group to have open war against another group. The United States of America has spent billions of dollars, trillions of dollars even sometimes, has put the use of armed personnel as a tool to combat those type of problems around the world. We never balk at the idea of our government using our soldiers, spending our tax money to go around the world waging war against authoritarians, against dictators, killing indiscriminately civilians. In fact, we think it's a noble cause to do that. It is a dilemma because it's hard to reconcile that we have such high regard for lives that we're willing to expend the lives of our soldiers, to spend billions of dollars and mobilize our war machine to defend the civilians who are being killed indiscriminately by authoritarian, by dictators. And yet right here in the United States of America, blacks are being indiscriminately killed by law enforcement. But we come up with all kind of rationale. We condone it because most of the time all the law for that individual, the law enforcement officer, to resign from the force, and well, his life is wiped clean. He doesn't have to pay any price for committing a murder, and sometimes get a slap in the wrist. Just recently, Laquan killer in Chicago caught where he deliberately killed an individual who did not antagonize him, someone who is just walking away from him. He unloaded his weapon, caught on camera, and we learned that he's getting just 6.5 years in jail just because he's caught. But prior to that, he was vindicated for being justified killing a individual. Yes, it is a dilemma that cannot be reconciled, that we're spending the lives of our soldiers, we're spending billions of dollars in taxes to go to war to protect civilians from authoritarian regime, from dictators, and right here in America, we do not just simply condone their action, but we also encourage their action. And that's done through various methods. So we're going to take a look at the systematic environment established by our government. We're not talking about just something that happened within the civilian society where people feel that they don't like blacks. Yes, there are that too, but it is a government who has been, since the beginning of time, has established a system, has put a system in place that makes it easy to torture, to violate civil rights of blacks, and get away with it because the system says that's fine. Now, if that sounds like gibberish to you, we will bring proof to you. We will bring evidence not just from the past, but from the current state of our society to show you that it is currently an ongoing matter, and we're turning a blind eye and are okay with that. And that's the part that's so hard to digest, because we seem to be highly concerned about civilians from other countries being mistreated by dictators. And that's the reason we spend billions of dollars in tax, in our tax money. We spend our soldiers' lives, and we say that we cannot accept those things. Now, you may have seen, opening for this segment, that there is a police officer, and that's not a made-up picture. That's a picture that was taken during the time that there were protests on the street in Ferguson, Missouri, after Michael Brown was gunned down by a police officer. And there were a lot of protests on the street, black protests. Now, the picture that you saw was a police officer now pointing it at the protesters protesting police brutality right here in America. Now, if you don't know that and you see that, you would have made the comment, where in the hell that happened? That you have pointing a gun at civilians right here in the United States of America. And a few people keep asking me the question, and I keep wondering, where do they live? Which country do they live? They keep asking, which war on blacks? Now, here was a situation which clearly demanded that society as a whole take to the street to protest what had happened. And the reaction of the same law enforcement who had just gunned down a black man is to point a machine gun at the protesters protesting police brutality. Which war on blacks, I'm being asked. Now, as I mentioned last time, the police officers, most of whom are nothing other than criminals with badges, They are the foot soldiers doing the job that our government has meticulously, systematically put in place in the destination of our young black individual, of the young generation. Those are not accidents. The idea of police officer killing unarmed black men fleeing from the scene, those are not accidents that happen. They happen so regularly that we have become numb to the idea, and when we hear a news like that, we don't even flinch anymore because it happens correctly. Which war on blacks, you ask? We left off when we were talking about period of slavery, the end of slavery. We left off the bottom of the bridge, which represent a link between the past and the present. The link we're referring to is slavery time. We left the conversation at the bottom of it. We left on the bridge a pile of bodies. We left behind us a pile of bodies, casualties never seen before, caused by one thing and one thing: the hatred expressed by whites towards blacks who wanted at all costs to keep it that way. That's all the Civil War was about. Where the problem of discussing war on blacks becomes a little bit difficult, because we mentioned during the time we were talking about slavery that the most difficult aspect of slavery is the fact that even during slavery there were millions of whites who were against that. Whites who know that it was inhuman to treat any other individual that way. There were also millions of others who felt that it was fine. So there lies the greatest difficulty of solving racism in America. We will bring the philosophical aspect of the discussion with some examples, and we will try to move the process from the bottom of the bridge and to start displaying the action of our government. And when I say government, of course, made of people, it's the senators, the congressmen, the mayors, the governors, all of those people lined up to set a system in place to make certain that blacks not only have hard time climbing the ladder here in our society, but also making certain that they take steps to destroy black generation in the hope that they can really prevent any type of progress. Of course, despite all that I just said, there is plenty of progress being made, or what we call from in relation to the past, because progress, as you might know, is very relative. So let's take a quick answer, and we'll come back to really delve into the system that we're following from the bottom of the bridge and see why today people place for the protection of our society, the police officers are the one actually committing crime against blacks in general, committing crime against the very society they're supposed to protect in particular. And our society has been condoning their action, thus giving them license to continue to do what they are doing, which is wrong. Live from New York City at the top of the hour, from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., the Fourth Branch presents discussions, debates, commentaries on social, political issues, current events, sports, entertainment, religion, education, science, and every Saturday at 10:30 a.m. for a full presentation on controversial issues such as abortion, homosexuality, war on blacks. Are Republicans dumber than Democrats? Information which might irritate, make you cry, make you laugh, but above all, will make you smarter. Join us every time. It is the right thing to do. It is the only way to keep your sanity in a world of chaos, immorality, and deception. Welcome to Common Sense. In 1949, it's something that we presented to you last week. In Florida, 4 young black men were arrested, mobbed by angry white. Their guilt was they were accused of raping a white woman. That did not happen. In 1989, New York City, 5 black men, 5 black teenagers, I should say, were arrested, charged with raping a white woman and beating her to death. That did not happen. In 1993-94, in South Carolina, a woman drowned her 2 children and accused a black man of kidnapping them. That did not happen. 1995 in Massachusetts, a man who shot his wife on the back of the head and shot himself, made it look like homicide, accused a black man of doing that. That did not happen. What all those stories have in common is the fact that again and again and again, every time a white individual does something wrong, it is very easy to pin it on black men. And society always reacts so disgustingly against that black man in particular, in general, because, well, they are criminals, because that's really the idea. Whites commit crime all the time, but you never see this kind of stigma on whites. Society has structured in such a way that suffice for a white individual to do something that's wrong, and to pin it on blacks. And society was accepted because, blacks, they are violent people, they are criminals. And in all of those cases that I just mentioned to you, blacks ransacked, rampaged by police, door kicked down to find the black men who committed those crimes. For one, I was an eyewitness in Massachusetts. I saw that, how they kicked down doors in black neighborhoods looking for the black men who committed that heinous crime. It only took a few days to find out that the person who actually committed the crime was the same person who accused a black of committing the crime. A white man, of course. But that's not something that happened by sheer accident. It was a stage set by our government. And this is not a far-fetched story. This is way, way back. In 1741 in New York City, a group of police officers, in collaboration with judges and made up eyewitnesses, accused blacks of setting places on fire and doing armed robbery. It was during slavery time. That was a way for them to kill blacks. They rounded up all the black men, pretend to do some kind of simulate, some sort of a semblance of justice. Of course, needless to tell the awards. That police officer, judges, they were all in on it. And history reported that. So those individuals I just mentioned to you in the 20th century did, whether it's in Florida, in New York, in Massachusetts, in South Carolina, wherever it happened, it did happen just because they happened to be creative in their mind. It's because our government has set a template for them that if you accuse a black man, even if there is no black man involved, society will just take it as true because, well, it's a black man. And that is one of the tools that you blacks, because suffice to say, a black person did something, there is no need to figure out whether it's true or not, because that is the culture that as a society we have been living in. And it started way, way back during slavery time. Yes, war on black is not figment of my imagination or that of other blacks. It is a war that has been ongoing that has caused many casualties. Too many casualties. The reason that you see the execution of young black men on the street by police officers do not get the country to be enraged is because, well, it is black. If you take the same scenario and change the individual being gunned down, executed by black to white, you would see a whole different reaction of our society. In other words, we know that it is wrong for those whose job is to protect to go out there killing, murdering, executing those very individuals they're supposed to protect. And just like in all those cases I just mentioned to you about civilian lying about blacks, officers, they actually mastered that art. Every time that they gun down, they execute a black man, they have two lines of defenses. I was afraid for my life, or he was running towards me, and I thought he was going to do something, and I thought he had a weapon. Those are the defense that time and again our society condemns behavior, and they get away with it. Why would they not continue to execute, to kill, to murder when they can easily get away with that murder? Lying is part of the whole deal. Now, why is it that way? Why does it continue to be that way for so much time after slavery been over for so long? Well, let's take a look at what happened beyond slavery. If you recall, slavery time, blacks were slaves, whites were the slave owners. Now, usually when the conversation about slavery arises, whites tend to walk away from the conversation because there is in the back of their minds a sense of guilt, because sometimes they may be offspring of white slave owners. Whenever the conversation begins, they don't want to hear about it because, well, slavery is over. Why talk about it? There are two observations that I have personally made. And in order to better the future, that's a statement, not the observation. In order to better the future, one has to understand, one has to remember the past, one has to learn from the past. Otherwise, there is no bettering of the future. Because if the idea is to forget what had happened, or to deny it, or then the idea of bringing a solution to a lingering problem, which is really not a small problem, such as racism in America, discrimination, then there would be no hope. No matter how much progress you hear that's being made, there would be no hope. Those problems could be resolved. During slavery time, the white slave owners had unfettered rights over the slaves. They could do whatever they want, because as far as that was the state of affairs, the government was fine with that, because the slave were the properties of the slave owners. So the slave owners could dispose of the properties whichever way he wanted. As such, slave owners did engage in measures that, by any analysis, those individuals would have condemned to, would have sent to death row, instead were committing murders. Then, at least the punishment for committing premeditated murder would be met by death penalty. But slave owners, because they had to respond to no one, they had to account to no one, so they used measures that, today, someone were to tell you they did this kind of thing to an animal, you'd find that person a cruel person, and you probably would not want anything to do with that individual. And yet those were the type of treatment black slaves were subjected to by the white slave owners. They were branded like animals. They were beaten until they bled, to work the field, scorching sun or shivering cold, without proper clothing. They couldn't be sick because they would not get any treatment. They would be forced to fail, even if sick, until they drop dead. And those who try to flee the area would be caught, and through punishment that's hard to read about, let alone talk about, and sometimes executed publicly so that the other slaves could see what their fate would be if they tried that. This were the white slave owners, their ways of dealing with blacks. Change. Now, there is no more slavery, of course not. At least not the way slavery was conceived. There is no more civilian being able to do this type of torture and pain on another individual. But now the baton has been passed to, well, law enforcement, police officers. So society find it just fine that, despite the fact we're in the midst of it, that we can have a law enforcement officer barking orders as if he's a slave owner and blacks are the slaves. So he barks order, everybody has to march on his beat. Don't act fast enough, then he will pull the trigger and shoot you. Concocted story. And society would say, that's fine by us. Now, the problem that we're talking about today did not start today, obviously. It was put in place following the end of slavery, the official end of slavery, because, as I mentioned before, during the time we were documenting the period of slavery, we know that slavery ended in 1865 officially. But even up to the 20th century, we have on record that places where there were still slaves. although not as widespread as in slavery time. But officially, 1865 was the end of slavery. Now, those white individuals who enjoyed the idea of torturing blacks, executing them without any kind of punishment, because there was none. Now they found themselves in a they could no longer do that because, slavery over. If you kill an individual, then you will have to account for that individual. So instead of, did I say that those people were those individuals who believe that? Did I mention that? Well, I did mention that during the documentation in the period discussing the period of slavery. Those were people who think of themselves as Christian. All those that I just mentioned, those murders that they were committed, those tortures, all those were happening by people who believed that they were Christian. So they found themselves in a dilemma because Abraham Lincoln, in executive order, signed an act, say, over with slavery. We break and make this stark differences, or at least bring to the conversation this aspect of society, which has made it very difficult for both blacks and whites to find a solution, because not only we come from two different environments, but we also have, well, obviously different experiences, and we see things from different angles, and we tend to set our ways as being we are right, the other side is wrong, vice versa. So we're going to take why we mentioned it before, but we'll make the point clear enough so that there is no misunderstanding as to when we're talking about war on blacks. We of course have the map in our head. We haven't got to that point to really establish this 30,000 feet picture of why things are the way they are today. But we have a pretty good idea, and we discuss a little bit the fact that since the beginning of time, the interaction between blacks and whites has always caused friction. And obviously there is a reason for that, and we'll look at it in just a moment. Hi, I am MD, host of the fourth branch program. War on Blacks is a topic added to the fourth branch programming in order to discuss the intricacies of race relations in America. The goal is threefold. 1. to bring attention to the various forms of prejudice, discrimination, and racism in the country. 2. To expose the undeniable presence of such in every aspect of life and every corner of our society. 3. To extricate us all from the ignorance, indifference, or the complicity. The ultimate objective is to make the discussions of those issues, racism, prejudice, discrimination, a normal part of our life. Then, and only then, will we as a society be able to eradicate the problem. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Nothing in all the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity." Abraham Joshua Heschel explains, "Racism is man's gravest threat to man, the maximum of hatred for the minimum of reason." Join me in the journey to restore equality. Or would you please get out of the way? Thank you. You see, relations are very complex. It's not black and white, no pun intended. You see, the conversation about race relation in America is difficult because blacks are overwhelmingly emotional about it for good reason. They've gone through really serious, unspeakable circumstances. They continue to live through racism, discrimination, prejudice every day, everywhere, in every aspect. They experience it regularly, witness it frequently, and they even become victim of it every so often. Whites, on the other hand, are much less concerned, for good reason as well. You see, the predicament we're talking about don't impact them as much. In fact, some of them don't even understand what we talk about. It used to be a time when whites used to blame black for exaggerating those situations. So they ignore it, they shrug it off. Now, understandably so, because obviously you are a human being. We look at it through the prism of our own lives. We live in a neighborhood that a certain way. We don't have the problem that we've been hearing blacks say they have. We don't have the police coming to antagonize. Well, talking about whites, thinking that way, police don't come to antagonize them, but police do antagonize blacks. Police harass blacks. Violates the civil rights of the black. So yes, white cannot understand those things because they are not subjected to those things. Now the question is, why? That's the question. Why do law enforcement And those are not isolated cases. For instance, in New York, in Far Rockaway, police officers, and this is a standard, almost a standard in that part of New York, Far Rockaway, Precinct 101 in particular, the police officers and of that precinct, and that's not something I read on the newspaper, something I know firsthand. Police officers in that precinct, they have this habit of going on the street antagonizing blacks in order to find a reason to arrest them. So those things are happening, and this is not an isolated case, what I just gave you. I happen to know it firsthand, so I bring it up to the surface. So the question is, why law enforcement, and of course they lie when they antagonize, and when you antagonize an individual, what do you expect to happen? The individual will react accordingly, and then insult a police officer, hit a police officer, get arrested, get tortured, get beaten, and go through the system as a criminal. You see, the problem is not a problem. It's a problem created by the government. It's a problem created by the system. You have police officer going on the street. I don't know how widespread that is. We will find that out because it's hard to find that out. But it is alarming to see that law enforcement, and I put that forth especially because this is a standard in far Precinct 101. And those police officers don't do that just on their own. Their boss, the chief of police, send them on the street to antagonize blacks because he wants to make numbers. And his way of saying that blacks, they have to be doing something wrong. How could you not make any arrests today? They have to be doing something wrong. This is the state of affair. This is the state that blacks live under. Even when they try everything possible to stay out of trouble, you have police officers coming to antagonize them in order to create a problem so that they can have a reason to arrest a black individual. And you think there is no war on blacks? Now, in all fairness, as I mentioned, the police officers, they are the foot soldiers doing the job for the system. Now, this is not to condone what they're doing because obviously they're human beings. They should, in fact, there are a few police officers from that precinct who left the precinct for that very reason because they realized that that's on the force to go and cause problem to society, to civilians. I joined to help, but the chief of police forcing them to do things in order to create a criminal record for black. So yes, what I just mentioned to you, if you investigate that, you will find out that it is absolutely true. And that's the blacks are living under. When a police officer arrests a black, and if that black individual survives the police officer, then you hear all kind of charges that individual to make that individual a criminal, give that individual a criminal record. Because the idea is to destroy blacks. It is indeed a war, and there are a lot of casualties. How do you justify? How does a police officer justify that his job is to antagonize civilians who are minding their own business in order to find a reason to arrest. Yes, that's what is being done in New York, in Far Rockaway, mainly by Precinct 101. How does a police officer justify that? And that's what they do. They antagonize the very civilian they're supposed to protect, to defend. And the reason is because the system has been put in place to make that possible. Now, I mentioned during the discussion on in the period of the period of slavery that there were millions of whites who were disgusted by the practice, who fought against it. In fact, some lost their lives along blacks for fighting against slavery. As I always mention, that's what makes finding a solution for the problem our society is confronting in terms of race relation so difficult, because even as of date, we have millions who are still fighting to put an end to what is currently going on, especially the type of discrimination, the type of prejudice against blacks. And there are also millions who are racist, who discriminate on a regular basis. And I'm not talking about white supremacists, I'm not talking about KKK, because every time this conversation comes, the comments that I get, it seems that those who are trying to meet the problem think, oh, it's just the few white supremacists, the few KKK. Well, unless you can tell me that they own everything in the country, because the discrimination that happened at the workplace, and it's widespread, discrimination happened at discrimination happened on the street, discrimination that happened at the store. Unless you were to tell me those white supremacists, they own all that, then you would have a point, but they don't. The extreme racism that in the like of the people that Donald Trump appealed to. But discrimination, racism in the country, rampant across the board. What's impossible to find out is to be able to meet a person, a white individual, and know that that person doesn't discriminate or that person discriminates. Have a way of knowing that. But discrimination is rampant across the United States. You go and apply, a black go and apply for a job, you find out very quickly that yes, that place discriminates. You find out that that place discriminates because you get passed over the promotion, not because you're not qualified, but because you're black. At the hospital, you get treated differently. At the school, you get treated differently. On the street, differently. This is not white supremacist. This is the system that makes it that way. I remember very clearly, me personally, and I always make the case, I always fight that case. I remember very clearly, I was racing on a highway, and it so happened that the individual was white. Both of us were doing something wrong. I'm not condoning what I just said. Both of us were doing something wrong. The officer decided to went after me, not after the white person. Both of us were racing. So yes, discrimination in America are rampant. Now those who are trying to deny it, who are trying to shrug it off, those are the very individuals I mentioned to stay out of the way because they're not helping solving the problem. Asking the very question is already a sign that you're not concerned. Which war on blacks? Now, why do I talk about that? I mean, what's the point? Obviously, there is a point to it, right? Because otherwise, people have been talking about racism, discrimination in America for the longest. There are so many different programs, there are so many times that we have heard one thing, discrimination in America. It is a tiring process. So why would you care that one more person decide to talk about it? At the bottom of the Civil War bridge, when we left that world behind, the world of slavery, whites, mostly slave owners and connected to slave owners, fought with their lives to keep slavery around. And speaking, they fought with their lives. At the end of the Civil War, according to historical record, there were more than 1 million casualties. 600,000 plus were dead, and the remaining were injured, wounded. So yes, white slave owners and everyone related to that part of the country fought with their lives in order to keep slavery around. Now I want to pause for just one moment, and I want you to think for just one moment about this very last sentence that I just mentioned. You have a group, a large group, millions of people, overwhelmingly white. They had slave owners that they enlisted, had them fight to keep slavery around. Do you see the freaking stupidity about those individuals who do the wrong things? Do you see how I don't even think I understand the mindset of people who are stupid. I have a difficult time grasping how they process information. Do you see the irony? They enlisted blacks, they enslaved, they subjected to torture, to killing, to note hours, to help them fight the other side that are trying to free them from that. Do you see the irony in that? And yet, that's exactly what they did. That's also the reason that they did have some problem, because a lot of those blacks, they were playing it safe, passing information to the other side, and some of them fled to the other side when they had a chance. I mean, seriously, you're torturing someone, you're beating the person, you're subjecting the person to this type of life, and you want that same individual to fight for you so that he can stay in that relationship. How stupid were those people? Well, they were very stupid. But that's not the stupidity that I want to bring forth to the conversation. It's something else. Those people, mostly overwhelmingly white slave owners, they thought of them as people with morality, religious people, people who love God, go to church, pray. They didn't read anywhere in the Bible that what they were doing was wrong. But what makes it interesting is the fact that those religious leaders who also had the Bible conveniently avoided any type of sermon that had anything to do with their wrongdoing. Just as it is today, whatever benefits them. Nothing has changed. So you have millions of whites who could only see one thing, that those slaves bring them money. Those slaves gave them the opportunity to buy houses, to send their children to school. Those slaves gave them the opportunity to enrich themselves. That's what we saw. Fast forward to today, we're seeing exactly the same movie playing right in front of us. Of course, there is no slavery. Why do you care to know about that? You see, context is important. To solve problem, you have to understand the problem. That is, if you're interested in solving the problem. Because the conversation about slavery, race relation in America, what has been lost in the conversation is the detail of the context. Because usually the conversation about slavery is over, everybody should move on, blacks should stop complaining about their situation because slavery has been for over a century now. That's the conversation whites, especially those who are comfortable with our situation. That's the conversation they want to have. That slavery has been over, let it go. It's time to move on. During slavery, white slave owners were enriching themselves, sending their children to school, and leaving behind inheritance. Sometimes plenty of it. Land, houses, businesses, great education. We will talk about that in much greater detail, but to give you a sense as to when you hear whites in particular saying black should just move on because, well, there is nothing here. Slavery has been over. Yes, slavery has been over, but the vestiges, the consequences, the aftermath, we're living it. And we're still paying the price for it. despite all the progress we're talking about. Let's fast forward to the end of slavery to give you a sense as to what we are talking about. Now, as you can already see, we're trying to approach the conversation about blacks in America, racism, discrimination, in using several different fronts. And there is a reason for that, because we want to move the process within the context and bringing with us all the different obstacles, difficulties that have been put forth to prevent black from being on the same level as whites. Because those do not happen because whites, especially white politicians, usually say behind closed doors, blacks are lazy. They forgot that blacks were subjected to 18 hours a day in the field, day in, day out, 7 days. Now you call that lazy. That's the way it is with whites in general. Whenever they do something to blacks, they always have to find a way to pin the blame on blacks. That's why police officers do it. They kill a black man, they say they were afraid for their lives. Oh, good enough. They kill a black man, they say they thought he had a gun. Good enough. They kill a black man, they say he was running towards me and I thought he was going to, and I shot him. Good enough. Every time whites do bad things to black, they have to concoct a story to find a way to blame black. And it started to happen during slavery, and they're still using it. And that's a tool used in the war on blacks. It's an effective tool. Politicians use it, and everybody else does. That's why the example I just gave you earlier at the top of the program of all the civilians doing wrong thing, committing murder, and blaming it on the no, those kind of approach work. We fast forward to the end of it. Let's call it day one, end of slavery. Joe, who is white, and Jim, who is black, came into a world there is no slavery anymore. John, white, Jim, black. That was day one after slavery. Picture that day. You don't really have to try to visualize it. We are currently doing our best to bring you that very picture to you so that you can see clearly that when you hear, whether it's black or white, saying that slavery has been over 100 years now, that should just bring about their business, because there is nothing to talk about anymore. There is plenty to talk about, and that's the context we're trying to bring forth in order to understand not only from the discriminatory aspect of our society, from the racism behavior towards even financial situation of blacks in our society. This is not a one-shot slavery is over. Everybody, you know what? This is over. Just go home. We're not talking about slavery anymore, so everything should just be fine. No, everything is not fine, because the aftermath left behind a lot of casualties. the Civil War, beyond the Civil War. And that's where we left off, and that's where we'd like to show you all the obstacles, all the problems blacks have to surmount while their white counterpart just coasting. So we will pick up from there. White, Jim, black, they both walked up to life the day after slavery. Let's call it day S instead. You know, the day after slavery. Now here's a preview. John White went to college. Well, let's not give him a job just yet. He went to college and has a good education. So he walked into the S. That is life. Jim just got freed from slavery. Doesn't even know how to read. Let's pick it from there, and you start seeing the picture of the casualties inflicted on blacks and how those aftermath of those casualties continue to spread and continue to haunt blacks. So the idea that slavery is over, move on, let's not move on. Let's address the problem and fix the problem. That's where we at the bottom of the bridge. And you are on the fourth branch program, Race for Common Sense. Hi, I am MD, host of the fourth branch program. War on Blacks is a topic added to the fourth branch programming to discuss the intricacies, the complexities of race relations in America. The goal is threefold. 1. To bring attention to the various forms of prejudice, discrimination, and racism in the country. 2. To expose the undeniable presence of such in every aspect of life and every corner of our society. 3. To exclude all from the ignorance, the indifference, or the complicity. The ultimate objective is to make the discussions of those issues, racism, prejudice, a normal part of our lives. Then, and only then, will we as a society be able to eradicate the problem. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "In all the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity." Abraham Joshua Heschel explains, "Racism is man's first threat to man, the maximum of hatred for the minimum of reason." Join me in the journey to restore equality. Or would you please get out of the way? Thank you. I will leave you with an interesting piece of information. 2012. This is the last piece of information we could find in regards to the stat we about to give you. Gang-related homicide in the United States. We will try to update that information, but we decided to use it anyway to make an interesting point. 2012, according to the FBI database, there were approximately 2,000 individuals who were killed. Homicide, gang homicide, exclusively gang homicide. That year, there were 15,500 people who were homicide. So, from the 15,500, 2,000 of those were gang related. That's equivalent to approximately 13-14% of the number of in the United States in 2012. Now, I'm going to use that number and fast forward it to 2017, and I have a suspicion that that number is still relevant, because from 2007 to 2012, that number did not change, which means the number of homicide actually it fluctuates both down and up, meaning 2000 in 2012 it could be 1900, 1950, earlier, and so on and so forth. It fluctuates, but it never for the period of time that information showed up in FBI database, it never went above 2000. So I'm going to fast forward that information to 2017, meaning we're going to say that approximately 2,000 homicides were committed by gangs in 2017. By the way, again, if you're paying attention, we extrapolate the information, but it's not related. That information is not related in the FBI database. At least we don't have that information yet. But we extrapolated from the fact that from 2007 to 2012, that was the information. So which means approximately 2,000 people were killed in gang-related activities. 2017. In 2017, 1,600 people were killed by police officers. Think about that for a moment. The individuals whose job is to protect are committing as many crimes as gangs on the street of America. And here's the kicker. The 1,600 related by police officers are not at all related with gang activities, meaning those police officers weren't involved in chasing gangsters, they weren't involved in protecting gangsters, they were not fighting gangsters. Those 1,600 people killed by police officers have absolutely nothing to do with gang activities. In other words, committed as many crimes as gangsters on the street of America. The only difference, gangsters are, if caught, are committing crime, police officers are given a pass. Think about that for a moment. We don't give any value to lives in America. As I mentioned before, and I'll mention it again, in England, London, a city that's comparable to major cities in America in terms of population, demographics, crime, and so on. In London, that same year, one civilian, just one civilian, lost his life to law enforcement. Those are the people who are on the street to serve and protect. But here in America, police officers are not on the street to protect. The idea, I was afraid for my life, as I mentioned before, if you got scared, then the job is not for you. Get another job, find a different job, because that's not, cannot be on the street whose job is to serve and protect, and every opportunity is killing the very people you're supposed to protect. So if you got scared, put the freaking badge down and figure out a job. That's not your job if you got scared. It is mind-boggling to me someone would choose that line of business and you got freaking scared. Put the badge down, turn the badge back, and find a job where you don't have to be scared. You don't become a soldier and be scared and shooting everybody on your way because you scared the person that's passing by you is gonna be someone that shoot you. And by the way, most of those individuals that police officers killed are unarmed. And we in our society, we condone it because the government set the system that way, they get a pass. So our society tends to have something for life. Like when you hear those people out there protesting against abortion because they so much want to preserve life, that's what they say. They so much want to preserve life, that's why they want to pass laws that prevent abortion. And yet, here it is in America, on a regular basis, on a daily basis, police officers are killing on. Hey, they don't care. If they so much for life, why aren't they also passing laws, very strict laws, that really punish the police officer, especially those who kill unarmed individuals? And because it's just lip service. If there's so much for life, then why are they condoning police officers killing unarmed individuals? And that happens regularly, that when we hear it, we don't even give it a second thought. We just go about our business because that's something that happens so often in America. Here it is. Gang members and police officers, they're doing the exact same thing. They're killing civilians. At least, let me say this. At least the gang-related homicide, they can have an argument because usually it's gang fighting with guns. So both sides usually have guns. At least you could say it was a fair fight. But police officers are killing unarmed civilians and getting away with it. That, in our society, is unacceptable. I invite you to watch this program on Monday at 10 a.m. That's the first segment of our program for next week. If you find something that's of importance to you, you want to reach out, you want to provide comments, suggestions, we would like to hear from you. We're not doing that for ourselves. We're doing that to better our society. We're doing that so that the future generation can have better society to live in. So if you have something better to add to it, if you want to contribute to this, by all means do. We are very open to that because we're not going away. That's not going to happen. So you might as well help to improve it. Like what you're seeing? Well, you know exactly what to do. Say what you need to say so that we can make it better, because you cannot prevent it from continuing the job. So you might as well help to improve it. Send us suggestion, comment, criticism to your heart's desire. Should you have a topic you would like us to debate right here, a topic you have information, you have links to information, we'd like to hear from you. We will research it and we will debate it right here on the porch. This program is not for us, it's for the future generation. It's to make this country, our society, much better. So you might as well participate, or, as said in the announcement, move out of the way, because we need to better our society. This is, after all, the program, the place for common sense. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. I hope to hear from you soon. And I hope you can join me again next on the Fourth Branch program. That was an update through the prism of common sense. Join us again next week. I am MD, host of the Fourth Branch program, the place for common sense. Send us comments, criticism, suggestion, or simply let us know how we're doing. Thank you for watching. Have a wonderful weekend. See you soon.
The Fourth Branch podcast is in collaboration with the People Branch publication, which can be found on the People Branch website, located at peoplebranch.org. That's peoplebranch.org. That's peoplebranch.org website, in which you will find a number of very interesting articles. My name is Matthew, MD for short. I hope you have a great afternoon or a great evening, whichever it happens to be. Hopefully you can join me again next time for another interesting this podcast. That was the fourth branch, live from New York. Good day.
Many heads screaming out, stop snitching. What if Adam and Eve ain't eat the fruit? You think we be able to see the truth? Or what if Albert Einstein ain't think of the nuke? Or Smith and Wesson ain't teach us to shoot? You think there be as many plays out there? Matter of fact, what if white man hung off a noose? Would it still be cool to say nigga? Or maybe we would make sick figures? Or would we wanna be crackers? And all the whites would be rappers? What if Martin Luther King survived? The New Orleans flood would have caused him to drop and die. I wonder what if and see what is. Stand back from the picture and ask yourself why. What if life wasn't all you thought? What if everything you knew was gone? What if we switched the right to the wrong? You change the route to the road we on? What if life wasn't all you thought? What if everything you knew was gone? What if we switched the rights and wrongs? You think you change the route to the road we on? If Christopher Wallace never got murked, how much money to be worth? What if Tupac never got hit with the flame? Would the game still have change filled with these lames? What if Jabari wasn't speeding down the street? What if the bullet Malcolm sent never hit Zeke? A black guy dropped off at the house instead of the stop? Or Ali never got by the. What if the little homie EZ didn't die? Stand back from the picture and ask yourself why. What if life wasn't all you thought? What if everything you knew was gone? What if we switched the rights and wrongs? You think you change your route to the road we on? What if life wasn't all you thought? What if everything you knew was gone? What if we switched the rights and wrongs? You think you change your route to the road we on?